Andy.
Hey, good to see you.
How are you?
Yeah, really good, thank you. Loving being in London in the warm weather, so yeah, it's fantastic.
It makes a change, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's fantastic.
It is. It's a bit like South Africa, but at different times of year.
Yeah, a bit like that, but it's very different. Just come from the rain and the cold, coming to the UK for the sunshine is amazing.
Spend more time here.
Probably will do.
Good. Well, I think a good place to start would be to tell the listeners, the audience, a little bit about yourself, how you got into the recruitment world, what that journey's looked like to where you are today.
Sure. I mean, I'm Andy Hallett. I probably started my recruitment journey at university. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I got elected president of the Students' Union at Reading University, which is the greatest job in the world. You basically get paid for a year to be a student and run a business. So that was fantastic, and then I had to get a proper job, and a couple of my friends were working in recruitment, and they were telling me about the sort of money they could earn. Obviously it was very hard work, but I knew I was better than them, and I could probably do even better than them as well. So I turned up for a few interviews, ended up working for a company called Huxley Associates, which was I think the third brand that was formed and later became the S3 Group. So started my career on a contracts desk in London in July 1999.
Great. What was it like back then?
It was very different to what I see now. I could only equate it to a very hardcore sales environment, very telephone-based. It felt like, being in the city of London, that you're in a trading centre, in a trading environment. I think the film Boiler Room had just come out, and it's probably as close as if you've seen the film Boiler Room, or the old Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
That's how it felt. Okay.
And at the time, did you take to it easily? Did you enjoy it? 'Cause you hear some people who didn't. They lasted a matter of months and they left and they've never gone back to it. But you're still here, so there must have been something you liked.
I think there was two things I really enjoyed about it to start with. The first was that I actually had no responsibility other than just get on and do deals. And I'd been in a situation for the previous year where, at the age of, I think, 22, I was responsible for a £5 million a year turnover business, legally responsible for the trust. And actually not having 50 employees with all the problems that goes with that was actually quite nice, just being able to get on with it. The second thing was, as well, racked up with student debt, and my 10k basic didn't go very fast, so I had to do deals. So didn't really have much time to do anything else than spend it in the office. I was living in Reading still, so I was commuting into London, and working in the city at that age was just fantastic.
Yeah, I bet. So the contract world now it's just gaining more and more traction. But what was it back then, late 90s? Fairly new.
We honestly, the poor relations of the office. Yeah. So when I joined, contracts were, they were the team that were. It was generally, if you weren't posh enough to do permanent, then you ended up on contracts. Huxley was a banking brand, and everyone hated us, and we loved that. Actually, it created that sort of team spirit. And when I think back to some of the salespeople I worked with there, they were just phenomenal.
So you learnt a lot from some of the best.
100%. My first boss was a guy called Scott Fulton, who went out and ran S3 Americas on the West Coast. My manager at the time was a guy called Mike Smith, who later came on to run S3 UK. And of course, Gary Eldon was MD at the time at Huxley, and later went on to be CEO of S3. And there were 10 other brilliant people in that office like them, and also as well there was a lot of people who then went on to start their own businesses in that office as well. Adam Buck, who went on to form and sell Faden, Mark Zanofsky. The list could go on with the number of people that were in that office and have actually founded great businesses.
Yeah. And what was the experience of S3 through those years? Like you say, I know it's produced a lot of people who are still very well established and doing great things in the industry. So it must have been a great learning ground into a career which was all but new to you.
Yeah, so I joined in '99, and Bill and Simon, who were the founders of the company, they started Computer Futures, I think, back in 1986. So they were still involved, but they were sort of on their exit path. There was a investment from Barclays Private Equity, 25%, I think, at the time, with a view that the company would float. And a lot of people are incentivized to stay to build their own businesses because of the shares that were about to come through. So I can only describe it as a very meritocratic but very intrapreneurial environment where people were incentivized to start new desks, start new teams, start new territories, even start new countries, new brands, but within the wrapper. Whereas today, I think people have to go outside of those bigger companies to get that fix. But I think we were one of the largest private companies at the time, and subsequently, had to then act like a public company to. I think the float in 2005, 2006, but. Very much the DNA, the culture was super strong still from those Bill and Simon days.
Okay, so it came from the founders, and that was instilled through everybody who joined and wanted to stay.
Yeah, 100%. So you had Bill and Simon, then they had the first employees, Russell Clements, Tim Lloyd, Sunil Wicks, and effectively that was just passed down through, from around the campfire. Those people just learned what to do, made it repeatable, kept it very, very simple, and just did well.
Oh, very good. And I noticed that you did some interesting things at your time at S3 beyond the contracts.
Yeah, so I worked as a contract recruiter for a number of years and did the classic trainee consultant through to manager. And I think it was after about 7 years, I got the opportunity to do a different role. Huxley were very much always looking to get an edge. The good thing about the brands is they used to compete very, very heavily. Although they were part of the same group, all the money ended up in the same pot generally. The brands were super competitive. And at that time, the Huxley brand, I think, went from number 3 to number 1. But there was a lot of reasons why we did that. We invested heavily in our infrastructure. We took people who were, strong billers, strong managers, and put them into roles. So rather than them just sort of managing teams of 10, 20, they could have an influence on a 500-man business, which was Huxley at the time. So I ended up as commercial manager for Huxley, so I was responsible for a lot of the building of the databases, a lot of the data management, our direct marketing, our contract structures, our internationalization, just making sure that we're completely optimized and making the most profitable decisions all of the time. So, really good opportunity. And at the time, I worked alongside Zoe Brent, who, again, another investment were made, and she made sure that Huxley were ahead of the internal recruitment. The training was absolutely on point. The marketing was on point. So I always remember one of the other MDs said, I invested in 4 salespeople, and Gary invested in you and Zoe to put the infrastructure for the brand. And latterly, after that, when the brands became probably a lot closer under the PLC, I moved in and I did that role for the group, so for all brands.
Right, excellent. And then how long did you stay with the group before moving on to new ventures?
So I pretty much did the commercial director role at S3 through till 2017, and then I got what I can only describe as the best job in the industry. So it was definitely the best job at S3. It was looking at innovation and investment. So S3 traditionally have been a very traditional recruitment firms, grown through organically, hasn't grown through acquisition, has just done the things repeatably well. But that won't cut it forever. And actually, the threat of disruption and the continual threat of disruption, I was tasked to build up and effectively look at secondary ventures. So if you like, spinning up platforms. We built a video platform. We became early stage adopters in technology and effectively placing seed bets on a number of emerging technologies that we felt had the power to either disrupt or build distinct revenue streams into the business. So I did that for a couple of years, and that was just fantastic. And it was almost like finishing school. It was taking an existential look at the looking at S3 outside in, and by 2019 I'd pretty much done my 20. As I say, I'd looked on the outside, and it's then very difficult to come back in and do what I'd call a really sort of traditional corporate type job again, when you've sort of traded the shirt and tie and the board meetings for a hoodie and in a WeWork office and those. So it was a really good natural time to move on, and it's been interesting. Took a break, took some time out, and then COVID hit, and I decided I pretty much ought to get on with it. So
So you've seen some change over the years. You got 2008, the financial crisis. You then had Brexit, and then obviously the pandemic. Any standouts over those periods of opportunity and challenges for recruitment?
I think what's really useful for anyone watching this now, and who probably is seeing a market that's more difficult than it was last year, is that this is normal. Ups and downs are normal. When I first joined, it was Y2K. So we were on contracts. No one wanted to touch their systems. They're all compliant. Code freezes. No one wants to touch it. Then the brakes came off. 2000, we went gangbusters again. Then the dot-com crash, 2001, and that obviously hit the software industry pretty hard. And but we've seen it, as you say. 2008, the sat there. No one believed Lehman Brothers could go down. We had a number of contractors at Enron. Nobody could have foreseen a company which was so big, so brash, hiring the best. Nothing was too good, and guess what? They went. So other shocks that we've seen, a lot of the strategy was based around oil and gas, and in 2014, 15, big change in that market. So it's pretty normal to see these type of things, and experienced recruiters would have seen that. But a number of companies I know that actually it's started in a downturn, and then it's actually then you're just looking up. So I count myself fortunate. I started my business in March 20, and I started the business with Dalton and Charlotte in, I think, June 20. And it was a really good time to do it, because I think it was very much a level playing field. A lot of established both consultancies and networks and groups had big infrastructures. They were carrying a lot of costs going into it, whereas we were very nimble, we were very light, and able to start. So, and also as well, there's nothing like right, okay, not sure how long this is going to last, motivation to get you out of bed and get you going. But so I don't think we'll see such a black swan event as we did with COVID for another good few years. But these recessions, these ups and downs are normal. What I would say is this year, the amount of variation you see month to month in the market is you probably see seeing in a quarter what you'd normally see in a year in terms of that variation. And that's across the board. Doesn't matter which country, doesn't matter whether you're talking to recruitment firms, if I'm talking to the big payroll firms, it's pretty uniform.
Why do you think that is?
I just think it feels very, very strange at the moment. You've got these forces which don't actually add up. You've actually got a whole war for talent still going on. There are still a whole host of jobs that need filling and not the people to fill them. And also you've got this weird situation of effectively very high inflation, which is going to drive prices, which is going people are going to need to get new jobs just to to stay even. So there is this backwards and forwards, I think, at the moment. And I think the other thing is that the big tech companies have almost replaced the banks. In the banks used to be the guys that hire. If they stopped hiring, the market went on free. The market went on free. 6 months later, they start hiring. The market comes back. It's these big tech companies now, and it's the layoffs that you're seeing there that's probably driven a lot of fear into the market. Actual reality is that investments are still being made. I think we're starting to see VCs sort of starting to deploy capital again, which will again really sort of grease the wheels of commerce again. So I think it's actually a fair market if we're talking in terms of recruitment right now. Firms who've got good processes, firms who've got good customer relations, firms who've got good candidate databases are able to navigate this. They're not getting the supernormal profits that they would have had for last year, where it was like a market like I haven't seen in years. But for experienced recruiters, it's still okay.
And do you think people know how to navigate what's going on?
I think some do and some don't. I think if you've never known, if you're a new recruiter post COVID, you've never known this type of market.
Yeah.
So what you actually had from COVID was a whole pent up need to do projects, a whole pent up redistribution. So you had this great redistribution. Everyone talked about a great resignation. I disagree. I think it was a redistribution. You effectively had people who sat there in a job they didn't want to be in, and actually, I'm going to go and do something. If this is my life, then I'm going to go and do something different.
Yeah.
Then you have people who, quite enjoyed, working from home, and the thought of going back into the office, they changed. You have people who hated working from home, who, then their company said we're going officeless, and then want to move on. So I think there was not only a lot of capital injected into the economy, but also as well a lot of people made different lifestyle changes as well. I mean, you saw it, the amount of people that fled London to go and live in the countryside.
Yeah.
And, because they wouldn't anticipate having to come back into towns and cities again.
Mm-hmm. So with those three things you've summarised, the war for talent, the high inflation, the lifestyle changes, where do you see those agencies who are doing particularly well taking advantage of those areas? Are there any? Because here at Target Recruit, we speak with a lot of agencies who they're diversifying into do new lines of business. They're opening up into new regions such as the States. So there's not that many that we come across who are just wanting to sit still and taking stock of the situation. They're being quite ambitious and essentially taking risks. So where do you think those areas are where there's the biggest opportunities for those ambitious agencies?
So right now, I think if I didn't have a contract business, I'd be building one.
Right.
It's if you actually look at the economic shock we've seen, it's been the permanent markets, and you can read this in the results of all the big quoted companies. So contract businesses are not only more resilient to this, but they're also valued significantly higher. So I think in this market, building that reoccurring revenue is really important for any firm, because you can ride out these shocks a lot better. You still get downturns, but they're just a lot smoother and a lot more predictable, and you're actually able to navigate your business significantly easier.
Mm-hmm. Anything else beyond the contract world? I know it's a broad question, but there's we see people trying different things, and it's where they prioritise it, I guess.
I think for me, the firms that do well just know what they do, and they stick to the knitting, and be that their niche, be that their territory, be that their industry, they're just very good at what they do, and they don't second guess themselves. They don't look over the fence at other people. If they've got to a point of success, they know what makes them successful, and they'll double down on that and get even better. So the grass is always greener, or appears greener for a lot of people, but actually being repeatably good at what you do well is both less risky, but it's also likely to be a lot more profitable.
Okay, so staying with the basics, but also being ambitious. And for those people who are looking to, say, go into the contract world and they're not used to it, how would you recommend they do it? Do they look to bring consultants in to advise them? Do they look to bring somebody from the contract world as a permanent hire to be the front of that business? I'm sure you saw a lot of that with S3, where there was different brands which came within the same groups. Some things were successful, some others. But if someone is looking to make that leap, where do they start?
Yeah, it depends on the size of your investment and your investment appetite. So you can do it in a number of different ways. You can go out and hire a contracts director who can build their own team. You can go and hire yourself a team leader / principal who can start the billing themselves and then bring people on and add to it. or you can hire someone who's done contract and get them to build out the desk and then grow from there. So there's a number of different ways you can do it depending on your appetite for risk. I think the thing common for me though is always get someone with contracts experience, and the reason I say that's important is just a very different skill set to permanent recruitment. I've seen good contract consultants go onto permanent desks. I've very rarely seen it go the other way. Permanent recruiters that can move on to contracts. It's almost how I describe it to people who don't know the industry. It's almost like rugby. If you didn't understand the difference in rugby union and rugby league, you'd think it's the same game. The pitch is the same. The ball looks the same. The players almost look the same, but it's very, very different. Watched by different people, different rules. It's similar for me. I feel with contract that it's just that different skill set.
Okay, and then for those businesses that are looking at moving to new regions, where are people doing well and not? We had PGC on recently in our podcast, and they were talking about there's a lot of people looking west to break into the US and capitalise on what appears to be a very ripe market. Are you experiencing a lot of people who are wanting to look further afield outside of the UK?
Yeah, so a lot of what we did at S3, I mean, when I joined S3, it was 99.5% UK based. I think there was a small office in Belgium that was the 0.5 of 1%. By the time I left, the UK was only 13%, and the two big regions for S3 were Germany and the US. The US is a natural place for people to start. You've obviously got the same language, which is a massive help that allows people. And I've actually seen a trend actually as well from. It used to be that you used to get UK business and then used to do the US. I've actually just seen a number of firms now just setting up in the UK and just targeting the US straight off the bat, which is an interesting, almost why start in the UK when you can, if you want to go to the US, just go to the US first. And it's a very interesting dynamic. The reasons that people like the US, the deal sizes tend to be significantly higher. There is a perception that there's less competition. The fees are higher. I think it's a more respected potentially industry, but it's not an overnight thing. This has been a gold rush for the last 20 odd years, so it's not a brand new thing that people are going to do that. The other very solid territory is Germany. Again, it's not as a mature market as the UK. The need for talent there is very, very strong. There's more cultural complexities in dealing in Germany, but again, it's something that a number of firms I know service Germany from the UK very, very effectively.
Okay, and with the consultancy side of your business, when do you see people coming to you for your advice and guidance, and what are they typically asking support and guidance on?
Yeah, so typically I work with firms that are looking to grow. It's really as simple as that. And for smaller firms, I will do a lot more, and I'll be quite generalist in my support. But as the firm grows, I'll niche into my specialist areas, which is contract operations, international contracts, and technology adoption. So I'll tend to niche into that. But what I think I really enjoy most about consulting is working with people to get to the solution they want to get to, which is most important. People have an idea of what they want to achieve, but when they hire me, I hopefully make that achievable for them and take them on the journey.
Yeah. Okay. So they know where they want to get to, but they need the guidance to take them there.
Yeah, most people normally know or have an idea of where they want, and it is really about working with them, taking that, really understanding what it is they're looking to achieve, working that through, prioritising, and just being accountable for getting those results for them.
Okay. You mentioned moving in the contract world and also technology adoption. Let's spend a bit of time on that. So what's your experience of the technology adoption now, but also what you've experienced since you started back in 2017?
So I think recruitment's always been told that technology is going to kill recruitment. Be it, I remember when I joined, it was the internet that was going to kill recruitment. Then it was the job boards going to kill recruitment. Then it was LinkedIn's going to kill recruitment. And what next it will be AI is going to kill recruitment. And what we've actually found is recruiters are brilliant at evolution. So, they'll take these things and they'll just use them to their advantage rather than it being a threat. They've actually, over the years, you've actually seen recruiters take these tools and just be so much better with them.
Yeah.
So I think for me, it's a constant challenge. I wrote an article a few years ago when Game of Thrones was really big about winter's coming. But winter's always been here, and it's that constant, up, down, recession, start again, and you see that with technology and technology adoption. I think the recruiters that do well have built their infrastructure, and that normally means a good technical stack, and will use it as well. And they'll not only use it for storing data, searching for candidates, but also they'll use that to monitor their business and effectively make better decisions based on data.
Okay, and with we see it with obviously being a CRM provider ourselves on Salesforce, we see technology changing all of the time, customers' needs changing all the time. Problems don't necessarily change unless the business is changing. So how does the business stay at the forefront of those of adopting the right technology for running their organisation?
I think you've got to be always clear on what you're trying to achieve. So in terms of, I've seen people buy the very best technology and use it badly. You're actually just better off, I think a bad CRM used well is better than a brilliant CRM used badly. So for me, I think it's about focusing on what it is you need to achieve and what's really important to your business. And that will be different for different companies, different markets, different territories. But I think just having a real eye on the prize of this is what we're looking to achieve.
Yeah.
And everything else falls back from that.
Okay. And you at S3, you were heading up that, you were responsible for looking at what was in the market. What if an organisation doesn't have that resource, doesn't have the expertise? We were recently speaking with Rob Green at RecTech, and this question came up as to who's nominated to look at it and how often do they look at it?
Yeah, typically it depends on the size of the business, and if you're a small company, that would traditionally be the founder, the owner, and as you go up the size of the business, it'd probably be the ops person, and you get bigger, chances are they'll have a CIO. So I think it really, really depends. I was just a small part of a very big machine, but the advice to a small company is exactly the same as I'd give to a big company. That you've got to work out what are your core processes, what do what do your customers want to see, and actually I think the problem most people don't, they see it through the lens of the recruiter, and they see it through the lens of the owner. They don't see it through the lens of what the customer customer is both a candidate and the customer is also your client who pays the bill as well. So I think for me, I would always go back to that. What is it you're looking to achieve? Be very clear around what your core processes are, and then your selection should become, if not easier, at least more narrowed down.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point there, because what a business wants to achieve and also what their customers want aren't necessarily aligned. So sometimes technology has to straddle the two, between what the business is wanting to achieve but also what their customers are asking for. I guess that comes into the whole conversation about how flexible technology can be, but moving out a system like a CRM isn't, it can for a lot of organisations, but it's a lot of disruption, and it's a bit of a thankless task, particularly because it doesn't happen all the time. I know that S3 within 5 years, I think they switched out their CRM 3 times just to stay ahead of the market. So do you recommend people to be constantly evolving with the tech stack, or try and find somebody who's going to be working with them and adapt?
I still come back to the customer. Every
Yeah.
business book you read will say that if you look after the customers, the profits will come. I summarise the work. I've probably spent years and years writing, and typically if you look at the profits versus it's linear. So I would say listen to your customers and then build back. I obviously left the organisation in 2019, but when we were working on systems, the things that CRM was pretty standard, but the thing that was most important was the search. It was called the Apollo search at the time, and the thing that gave a unique difference to S3 was their ability to deliver candidates. So there are great firms out there all day, every day. I genuinely believe that the USP was, certainly while I was there, that ability to deliver a candidate. If there was some random technology, there were 7 people in the world that knew it, we'd know who the best person placed was to do that, and we're able to deliver. And that for me was the if you like the USP around it. But the search was where all of the investment went, and that was very, very important as well. So focused on the things that really, really mattered.
So around that ability to put people in the right jobs and search for them efficiently, why was S3 so good with that? I'm kind of coming from that, from like the technology perspective. So was it the data? Was it the systems, the processes, the people? Why was it so successful?
There's a whole number of things there. So first and foremost, the candidate acquisition strategy was completely on point. Even from the very days when it was manual, Bill and Simon basically used to buy up the back pages of Computer Weekly. So it was pretty much 6 back pages with 6 brands of ads. So every time a CV came in, it was treated as an asset. It was coded up. Back in the day, it would have been on a very manual system, but then going forward, it was indexed into Oracle databases. So what actually changed, the paradigm change used to become that it was very, companies didn't have a lot of data. They couldn't retrieve it quickly. What the likes of electronic databases did is meant you could hold vast swathes of data, and then the challenge became getting to that data. So the tools that to find and search across your data had to get better and better. So I think it was a mixture of caring about data. And actually what you're going to see is data is, expression, data is the new oil. So what you're actually going to start to see now is that, back in the day, if you had a CV came in, you had to tag it, you had to code it, you had to look. But that's almost like the paradigm is the internet. So you don't need to know the URL because you can just Google it, you can just search it. You don't actually need to know, that where everything is because you can just find it. And I think what you're going to start to see is the companies that do have big data will start, some of the systems will get even smarter at being able to retrieve data quicker, faster, and with a greater skill than potentially very highly skilled consultants can do so.
I mean, that would be interesting because capitalising on that data and knowing what to do with it is a huge topic and question in itself. You've got organisations who have got reams and reams of data, but they're not necessarily capitalising it because the system that they use can't interrogate it. And when it is interrogated, it's not necessarily spitting out anything meaningful for them to know what to do with it.
Yeah, recruitment's quite an interesting industry in the sense that it's both B2C and B2B. So you're B2B with your customers, so you treat them almost in a CRM management way, managing that. But you almost need that sort of B2C approach that then, if you look at it, the online retailers do it really well. They know who you are, they know your profile. They know when you're going to buy. They know if you've not bought for a while to send you an offer, et cetera, et cetera. So I think recruitment has moved on in the sense that now it used to be very much around sales. I think there's a whole new marketing aspect, but also as well, it's become a data management business. And if you actually break down, if someone were to look at a recruitment business from the outside and didn't know what it was, but just looked at what the processes people did, you'd see it as a data management business, and that's why I think the firms that invest in their technology, invest in training their teams to use that technology and maximise that technology, are the ones that are best placed to really do well in this market.
And do you find that perhaps contract and term are interrogating the data more often than perhaps a traditional perm business, where things move slower than particularly the temp world does?
Yeah, so contracting is about the immediacy. It's about getting to that candidate potentially before your opposition. It's speed is everything. So if you have a large database, if it's well organised, or you've got tools to get you there quickly. The other thing I would say is that good recruiters manage pools. So they manage pools of customers, they manage pools of candidates. Mm-hmm. Technology now enables you to do that even easier, in terms of having that permanent conversation, in terms of having things like chatbots to reach out and say, I've got these vacancies. And I actually think the recruiters who use their assets to the most are the ones that are going to be most successful in this market.
Okay. And do you think that's usually a skill which is being born from the inside, or it needs somebody with a fresh pair of eyes to come in and advise on that? Because it's very easy to get into your day job and not necessarily think about a new innovative way to work. You mentioned there at S3 that it was people were encouraged to be entrepreneurial, and I guess when you've got all your peers with that mindset, you're going to breed from it, but not necessarily all businesses have that sort of culture.
No, typically, I mean, I was a strange in a strange role. And it's an unusual role, but there are lots of people who end up in these sort of commercial / technical roles that are there not because they're technical, but they understand the business. Mm. So when I was working with IT departments and finance departments for some of the back office things, the thing that I was able to add value was, I understand actually it's really difficult to do a deal. It's really competitive out there. It's actually really hard work, and actually understanding the process and understanding why certain moments of truth are important as well is to get that out and to explain that, so that when you're building these systems and processes, that it's not in a vacuum and it makes sense to the real world, because recruitment is hard. Being a recruiter is tough work. Yeah. So you want those systems and processes to support. So I think from my perspective, I think having those outside view, a lot of people who start recruitment businesses are really, really good salespeople. They've been good salespeople, they've been good managers, good directors, but traditionally they've not been involved in that part of the business. They would have worked for a firm where they perhaps didn't have P&L responsibility. They perhaps didn't. They were just told which system to work on. They didn't have to think about the marketing because there was a marketing department. So typically, when I'm working with firms, it's supporting them on the areas that they might know, but they're either just not second guessing themselves and just giving them the courage of their convictions to do the right thing, and that certainty around they are doing the right thing. Yeah.
Okay. Just going back to, I think you've raised a really good point around the customer needs. Because I don't think everybody necessarily thinks always with the customer in mind, but it would be useful just to explore that a bit further, particularly around how you've seen customer needs changing over the last 20 odd years, from when you started in 99 through to where we are now. Because it's all well, we were talking about how you get engaged with organisations who want to grow, but how has the customer evolved over that period of time?
The customer's more sophisticated, so they understand the process. The customer also, as well, has a lot more opportunity to do it themselves, is the other thing. And
is that what you found?
Yeah, I think you've obviously seen a big rise in. So I think marked differences since I started nearly 25 years ago are that you've got the rise of the in-house team. So you're finding that companies are investing, and it's not just a cost thing. They're actually investing because they want the experience of their people looking at joining their organisation to be to be strong, and they want to own that. They don't want to outsource that necessarily to an agency to do that. There's obviously questions around, can they ever have the same reach as an agency that do this all day, every day? But for core positions, I've seen some really good in-house teams. And the second thing I would say is the big difference is the product used to be the person you found. It used to be the candidate. Yeah. Whereas the candidate now is available. They're sat on LinkedIn. You can potentially get online, a direct job response. The data is more available. So it's actually become a lot more about the service. So it's about how that is presented, how the candidates are managed, how the process feels, etc., etc. So I think whereas it used to be, okay, it was fine, we could get away with just finding, they were a good developer, you needed a good developer, great. It now has to be all around the service, because there are a lot of companies that can find you a good developer, and you could potentially even find it yourself. So it's that service layer that I think has really, really changed. So I think it's gone from being a product business to a service business.
Okay. And then how did the businesses who are doing well, who are, they're really clued up to that customer experience and providing the service rather than just the other side of the product, the person, where are they doing the right things?
So I think it's about being very good at, I talked before about just being repeatable. They're not trying to do everything. They're just trying to do what they do and do it very, very well. They will manage customers' expectations. They'll work. I think the best companies that I see are the ones that just focus on delivering, managing, building their people well, and delivering a great service for their customers. Everything else looks after itself if you can do that. Okay.
Sounds straightforward.
It does sound straightforward, and it's really not. And the thing is, I just look back at how complex the role has got. So back in '99, you pretty much had the telephone. You could email. You're still faxing and sending out, but it was relatively straightforward role. There wasn't a lot to manage. Find jobs, find candidates, fill them. Whereas now, if you look at what a 360 consultant's got to do in terms of managing their LinkedIn profiles, building outreach campaigns, they've got to be marketeers, they've got to be salespeople, and there's so much more to the job than there used to be. I think the consultants that do really well are the ones that are super organised and just keep it as simple as they can.
And are you finding that still? It still attracts people who are hungry and who, like you, wanting to make money, even though there are more elements to the job. I mean, technology is not new to people now. They kind of know that they're going to have to be on LinkedIn. They know how to use a system, a database. They've probably used it in previous jobs. So do you think people are still coming in with eyes wide open, knowing that they're going to have to get into those things?
I think recruitment's a very transient job. The classic, no one ever grows up wanting to be a recruitment consultant. It's a job that people fall into. Generally, and some people stick at it. I think recruitment's got an issue, and has always had an issue with the amount of churn it has. A lot of people come into the industry and leave it, and I think it's I remember when I told my job I was getting a job as a recruitment consultant. She asked me when I was going to get a proper job, and it probably took a few years of buying things like houses and cars, and doing meetings abroad and holidays abroad to actually maybe it's a proper a proper job. But I think recruitment should start to see itself more as a profession than a job, and to do that as well, it needs to take a longer term view. I think people who come into the industry need to know that it is a rewarding career, but also as well it's very, very tough to start with. A guy called John Lee I used to work with long time ago just said no one ever fails at recruitment, they just give up.
I've heard that before, actually. So where do people start? Who's responsible? I know there's not one person, but who's responsible for changing how, I guess, the industry is viewed and making it more of a profession and essentially reducing that churn?
So I think it's a classic. It's everyone. Recruitment is a product of also as well as the products of the customers. I mean, if you actually look where customers pitch 5 recruitment companies against each other on a contingent mandate, then actually you're not going to get the same level of service as if you left it on a retainer with one. It's very, very difficult to say how do you stop the race potentially to the bottom of fees and service. So I think end customers, are the ones that effectively determine you pay for what you get. So, but agencies as well, the very top agencies drive quality into the process and know their value.
Yeah. Okay. And then you were saying that there's been a lot of change which is happening a lot more frequent now, rather than taking several quarters, it takes several months. So where do you see the next big changes in the short term?
So I think you look for the economic indicators. So I think when you start to see things like inflation, which is probably peaked but doesn't seem to be sliding away, I think you'll start to see people effectively holding fire on making investments while that seems pretty high because the cost of borrowing's going up, etc. So I think that might have us in a holding pattern for a little while, but there's I also think as well with new technologies like generative AI, you're actually going to see this again, a redistribution of jobs. There's going to be whole industries where they will be disrupted. Look at something like copywriting. Now, copywriters, I don't know if they're as evolutionary savvy as recruiters, but would you start a career in copywriting right now?
Probably not.
Probably not. And the ones who are really good at it will continue to, one imagines, outright. But probably use things like generative AI to their advantage. So you're going to see, literally, like an industrial revolution, you're going to see certain jobs that will cease to exist or will only exist in a specialist area going forward. So I think it's about understanding what new opportunities these technologies. So I think you're going to see a lot of challenge around that, and actually you're going to see a lot of social potentially problems as a result of typically these changes.
Yeah, and do you think that with those changes, particularly around AI and the redistribution, is it the industry, or do you think, and I know it's tied up, but do you think it's going to be the agencies or the customer who's driving that change?
I think historically it's been the customer need will drive the change.
Yeah.
So and the agencies again have been pretty good at adapting to the need, but I think recruiters will some of the use cases we've seen Dominic at Required, who've brought in to act as our specialist. The amount of interesting excuse me. The amount of interesting use cases that we're seeing now that you can is just phenomenal. So I think,
such as, do you have any examples?
So I think just the ability to order candidates. I think to rewrite job specs, to profile, to write adverts that really sort of lean into what the end customer's trying to feel. So if you effectively feed in, you're recruiting for a company, feed in that company's website to, and then rewrite me this job spec. So you get the feel of the company that comes through. I think there's potentially you're going to see a lot of this technology be able to reduce bias. So you've got a lot of D&I aspects to it as well. Or it could accentuate bias, which does exist in recruitment. So I think there are inflection points as well around how these technologies will evolve.
Mm-hmm. I guess the reason, and I agree with what you've said there, and the reason why I asked about who's going to be leading at the client or the customer is because I think quite often the client is wanting to get ahead of the curve to provide that better service to the customer, and I'd be interested to know whether the client is sitting down with their customers to say, look, you need to be getting on board with this with our support.
Yeah, I mean, I think what recruitment agencies aren't great at is telling the customers what they need. And the best ones that I see are not order takers, they're partners.
Yeah.
And by its very nature, we talk about, recruitment agencies talk about being partners with their customers. That, for the most part, they're not, they're order takers. So
Why? Why do you think that is? Why do you think there's a distinction between some who are and some aren't?
I think it comes down to experience. I think it comes down to, you don't want to rock the boat. You just want to make it nice and simple, and that's the way it's always done. But the good ones are the ones that are innovating and giving customers something they didn't know they needed, and that's really important and value add. I always talk to customers around how do you make yourself sticky with the customer. You're literally one phone call away from someone else stealing your lunch. Yeah. So what are the reasons that they would stay with you? And that typically could be that they've got a great relationship with one of your consultants. Well, what if they leave? It could be that you just work in their niche. Great. Could be that you don't work with their competitors. There's a whole host of reasons, but understand why your customers would stay with you is really, really important. And if there's not enough reasons, make sure there are a number of reasons.
Of course, yeah. And I guess that comes back to the point of being good or doing the things that doing what you're meant to be doing, but doing them well, and then understanding it well so you can impart that knowledge onto your other customers, rather than being like the in-house recruitment team who's perhaps looking inwards and not getting the experience of the wider industry.
Yeah, 100%. Taking that best practice, sharing it. And recruiters, I think the other thing that recruiters need to know is that hiring managers generally spend less than 5% of their time actually hiring. Recruiters should spend 100% of their time. That's just what they do. So the amount of knowledge they have is actually really useful to their customers as well. So it's about how you use that and how you show value other than the fact of we've just put a body on a seat for you.
Yeah, okay. So since 2019, when you moved away from S3, what are those standout changes that you've seen in the industry over the last 4 years?
So, I mean, as I said, I was really lucky. The last role, I actually had a real outside look. So it was almost a very sort of soft landing for me. I'd worked very hard on building up a network, and I think S3 was it was very good at doing what HIT did. It was very insular, didn't tend to look outside too much, pretty much didn't need to. So what was a big interest for me was the number of these recruitment networks that had sprung up. I won't bore you with all the names, but worked with a number of those while I was building my business, and then having sort of met and worked with Dalton and Charlotte, we decided that we felt that we could offer something different with Required, and something that worked for us and indeed our members. So I think the biggest thing actually that I saw during COVID was that it was a strange time in recruitment. Companies were usually so competitive against each other. Actually, this sort of global shock, it was actually the industry against oblivion, as opposed to individual companies against each other. So probably the biggest, I think, change I've seen is that the amount of businesses that are actually prepared to, to talk, to work together, to network, to share experiences. And we see that on a daily basis in our groups. We've obviously got the 3 groups, the startups, the scale-ups, and the enterprise groups, and they all want different things. But what's quite interesting is that a lot of their challenges are always very similar, and there's a real willingness to help out other people. Because I think, go back to my point, recruitment's tough. So if you can help someone else, make it easier, then by all means you should do. So that's probably one of the biggest changes that I've sort of, coming from a relatively insular environment to there's a big wide world out there.
And you think that the COVID was the trigger for that? There was so much uncertainty. Let's just speak with people across the network and share thoughts and ideas without being, too protective?
I think it was very much there. I think it was always there, but I think COVID really made it, put it on steroids, just made it happen.
Yeah.
And I think the genie's out of the bottle now in terms of that openness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I've coming into this space with heading up the sales for Target Recruit in the UK and EMEA. I've never come across an industry which is so closely knit, and a lot of people know a lot of people, which was a pleasant surprise for me, that you speak with people and a lot of people just know each other, but also on very good terms as well. So with that networking group that you've got with Recwired, what sort of things are you discussing? What's coming up on a daily basis? I guess it's going to be a whole load of things, but any standouts?
It really does vary by the group. With the startup groups, it's generally what I call hustle questions. Mm-hmm. How do I do this? How do I get this going? I've been backdoored. How do I do this? What's good technology to start with? Anyone recommend an accountant, etc., etc. So that tends to be those, and also as well, if you start your own business, it's actually quite lonely. Yeah. So typically, you won't have someone in your family who understands the industry. You'll be very, when you're starting, it's very much so. So actually, I think there's just a lot of comfort there for those people. The scale up group tends to be around how you're hiring through, what sort of commission plans you want to put people on. A lot more about technology, getting the most out of technology, etc., etc. And the enterprise group is a lot around just looking at sort of the wider figures, talking about the market, how you're finding hiring, those. But increasingly, those guys are at some point looking to exit their businesses. They're looking to they've been doing it a number of years, but then looking for the next challenge and looking to exit the business as well. So it really does vary by group, but the groups are always incredibly chatty, and it always amazes me actually how we don't churn as much, because they're quite busy, and recruiters are generally, and recruitment owners are generally busy people, but there's obviously a strong interest and strong value there for them to be staying.
Yeah, okay. It's just what you've been mentioning there about the network and sharing ideas. I've worked at previous software companies where you kind of work within the company. What you provide is what you provide. But with Target Recruit being built on Salesforce, we work with a lot of different partners who are built on Salesforce or integrate with, and we get together very often when it's either a joint bid or we meet for a coffee or a pint, and just sitting down and talking about what's happening in the industry, where the challenges, where's the successes, how we knit everything together. I think that hasn't come by accident. I think it's with the industry that we work in, it's having an effect on the suppliers as well, in a really positive light, because we can share and work together a lot stronger when we're all sharing the best ideas.
Yeah, and people are generally looking for those win-win scenarios, and we see people do things like job splits. So typically I'm a food and beverage recruiter. I've just a mate of mine is looking for an architect. Anyone want to do a split on it? And we see that as well, and people helping out people. Yeah, and it's really, really good to see.
It does seem in a lot of ways like a selfless market to be in, and people are happy to be sharing ideas.
I think the thing I found as well is that as an industry, paying it forward really, really works out. So when COVID came, I had nothing to do, but I was locked down in the UK and had nothing to do other than give away my time. So I think I put my Calendly link out there, and I spoke to 50, 60, generally quite small businesses, and just tried to help. So they obviously, people worrying about what going into. I'd obviously worked through recessions, albeit a much bigger organisation, but the lessons were exactly the same. But what I found was that I'd just be as helpful as I could, and I'd just just give away my time, and then people would naturally want to buy more of it, and want to bring me on board, put me on projects, etc., etc. So for me, it was if I'd have been okay, you paying for this, then and there is a fine line between valuing your time and effectively just becoming a very a very free resource for people, and I worked that out relatively quickly. But actually, what for me was great was that paying it forward just worked, and actually I think in these groups you see exactly that. If people can help out, they help out, and they know that they're gonna. The karma will come back round and they'll get it.
And if someone sitting, listening, watching this today, what could they expect if they came to join Required?
So first and foremost, we're open to new members all the time. We are a freemium model, so the groups are completely free. We welcome anybody. We'd only ask that you're a recruitment founder or sales director, and come in and contribute to the groups. We are UK. We've got members in United States, Europe, Australia is very big. We've got a separate group for that. So I think we'll probably be 1,000 members by. Certainly by the end of the quarter. So I'm working on growing that out significantly. We'll be bringing in some exciting new subscription services for our members as well, bringing in things that they need, such as training, advice, mastermind classes. So the sort of things that we see the need for, and actually when you're starting up or you're scaling up, it's a fairly well-trodden path and a process. But if you don't know, or you don't have that current, the experience of doing it, again, it's pretty lonely. So we're building that, and we've partnered with Dan Alexander, who's one of the best trainers in the industry, to build us all of that coursework as well. So that'll be exciting for us coming at the end of the year. And for us, it's about evolution. It's about innovation. It's about constantly growing and how we can add. And again, we're constantly looking at the member experience. So how can we enhance that member experience?
And you've got a good, strong partner network as well of different suppliers, such as Target Recruit or the CRM providers, and that's something that you can offer through as a recommendation.
100%. And I think the thing I love most about our partners is they've been chosen by us. We've chosen them because they've come as either recommendation from the group, or we've worked with them previously, or and I think for me, it was a real vindication of the quality of our group that we're very early able to go to our original partners, who are Workwell and Kingsbridge, with the proposition, and they were very, they came on board very quickly, and have been great with us ever since. And as the network's grown, they've been fantastic. And then we brought other partners such as yourselves, Cloud Course in the ecosystem, on gradually as we've gone. I think that the thing for me is that our partners have to represent us as well. So if we're recommending products and services, we've got to believe in them. And if we don't believe in them, then it doesn't work for us. And I think what's really good about having partners as well is it doesn't always work out. So there are sometimes service issues. We're able, because they're partners, we've got a bit of skin in the game as well to help escalate that for our members as well. And typically that's worked really nicely for us. Yeah,
and I think the recommendations has been, certainly from our perspective, it's been invaluable. We've been established in the UK for a number of years, but we relaunched a year ago, and being associated with yourselves and other bodies, but being recommended, just it has so much weight to what is for a lot of organisations a bit of a minefield when they're looking for a supplier, whether it be CRM or other.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many CRMs out there, and how do you start navigating that? So we've chosen the ones that we feel working for our members, and different systems will suit different members. I always say you're trying to find the least imperfect when you're building a CRM. But the thing we enjoy about you guys is you built on the Salesforce platform. I use Salesforce at S3. We built our own proprietary system. probably wouldn't go and do that again, wouldn't recommend anyone doing that. But the thing I loved about Salesforce most was the ecosystem. And again, Salesforce is a really good example of they don't bang on about software. And I actually think Salesforce is the best marketing company in the world because they don't talk about the software. They talk about the outcomes. They talk about the feeling. And, again, you guys hooked to that wagon makes it, already some of your job's done because it's the number one CRM in the world.
It is. And I think that, that we'll keep going back to that network in the ecosystem, like with Salesforce, is that, Target Recruit's very good at what it does with the CRM, but because there's businesses now which don't necessarily want one provider who does everything. They're very open-minded to having best of breed in pockets, but what's so important is for that integration across the piece. They don't want to be going back to that whole import-export routine, which, believe it or not, and you'll see it, there's a lot of people doing right now, and it causes all sorts of issues around data integrity and wasted time. But being part of Salesforce, we put our hands up and say, okay, well, if you have a particular requirement, we can't do it. There's a partner out there who we either work with or is part of the 4,000 different apps within the App Exchange, where it's usually a plug and play, and it just enhances what they've got. And it's just that network which people love about Salesforce. And not everybody gets it at first. Sometimes you have to start slow and educate them about the power of the platform rather than buying a product which ticks a lot of boxes but isn't necessarily easily adaptable. But that's why I'm a Target Recruit, because of Salesforce. Yeah,
and I think that's the interesting thing is the platform, and if you're buying an enterprise, then platform is important. So we got it, and I've known Andy, your CEO, for a number of years as well, and when you effectively launched in the UK last year, it was a very natural thing for us to work with him, and now you guys on that as well.
No, it's been great to be part of it with you. Anything else that you want to be covering?
I don't know if there's anything we could shoehorn in there about, when you're speaking of the larger groups, talking about exiting the business, and I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about those and what key points you would go through with that.
Yeah, so maybe talk about M&A, just saying, so what do you, so obviously you talked about, maybe the question you tee up, you talked about the enterprise group, looking to see what are you seeing in terms of M&A at the moment.
So you mentioned about, as part of Recwire, the networking group, there's kind of three groups. You've got your startup, your scale up, and then the enterprise. Tell us a bit more about that merger and acquisition space and how people are looking to deal with it and approach it.
So the M&A space is interesting. If you ask every recruitment founder, I reckon 95% will say they want to sell their business, they want to exit their business, and but in reality, I think it's 0.1% of companies actually ever do sell, do exit, and there's been some really nice juicy exits over the years. We think back to Fader and think back to Nigel Frank, and those are the poster boys of the deals, but they're not always the ones that that's one in a good many thousand. So I think a lot of companies would have felt very confident about that last year. I think it's a bit more difficult now. I don't think the valuations are going to be quite as high. What I would say as well is always be, my advice to founders is always be in a position to be bought. Always make yourself buyable. And what I mean by that is that there's always reasons why you'd want to sell. What's the reason someone would want to buy you, or someone would want to, invest in you, etc., etc. So really good advice I would give to people is who's going to acquire you, and who would you like to be acquired by, and get yourself effectively in the shop window for doing that. Might not be that the deal comes along, but you want to be ready to go for it and be able to do that. Key things, make sure there's no skeletons in your closet. I know it sounds super obvious, but actually you don't want to give reasons for a deal to go away. I worked on M&A for S3. The reason I don't generally mention it is we never bought anyone, and actually the reason we never bought anyone was we looked at these companies, the investment deck was great, you went in and actually the businesses had fundamental issues. They were either so reliant on certain key people that would possibly leave the business when you left. There were contractual risks in there. One company we looked at, their growth was completely based on FX over a number of years, as opposed to actual real growth. So, and then the cost of either fixing these things or the reduction in value, made those deals go away. So I would say always have always be ready to there. I would advise anyone looking to sell their firm to start their data room day one. So, basically have a whole list of folders with all of your contracts, all of your leases, make yourself buyable, make it easy for someone to come in.
Yeah.
So someone like me who is working on behalf of an acquirer isn't going to have to go and dig around. It can just be very, very easy and found. So, and part of that is having good systems, good processes, but it's about being very well documented and, just be ready to go.
And is the whole M&A world to some people scary? Like, do they know where to start? Do they know what the potential skeletons could be? Or are they hoping that people don't find them? Where do people start?
No, I think once you made up your mind, you're looking to do it. Then it's like anything. Get yourself a really good advisor to do that. It's not.
Would
really,
that be you, Brian?
No, it's not. It's not really I said a really good advisor. So it's not. I'm not the finance guy that's going to help you through it. But again, get yourself match fit. Get yourself ready. Typically, I'll work with those advisors in terms of making sure that the operational side of things is absolutely on point. But it's like anything. Have yourself a specialist who can take you through that process. The other thing I would say as well is be clear around what it is you can do afterwards. A number of people I know have exited recruitment businesses, just got very bored very quickly, and I'm sure once the novelty the novelty of spending the money, I'm sure never evaporates, but sometimes it's very empty. You've put your heart and soul in for 10, 15, 20 years, the same thing. You've turned up at the same. It's been your life, it's been your social, it's been your family in some circumstances, and then it's like you're exiting stage left. So I think be very mindful around have other aspirations and things to do.
Yeah. Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground there. Your background, your learnings from S3, what you've seen as part of your consultancy and network and group. Looking forward now to 2024, what do you think the main trends are that we're gonna be seeing in the industry? So
I think we're going to see. I'd like to see a lot more moving towards contracts, so that people, agencies are really sort of locking in that value and building predictability into their business. There's going to be a lot of geopolitical shocks, both economy, elections in the UK, potentially elections in the US, all sorts of different influences, and actually it can just be a change of party in the US or a change of party in the UK that can completely change the labour market as well. In terms of employment legislation rules. So like anything, recruitment just constantly change. I think you're going to see recruiters really taking on board and grasping more technology. I think you're going to start to see the companies who've built their data investments really start to pay off. I think you'll see a continuing rise of small boutique companies where people are leaving the industry thinking that they can make a difference and service customers in a way that isn't available in the market. And typically what will happen is the tech companies will all start racing to hire all the best talent, and everyone will, the market will be back, and that will set the tone for the real sort of the skills gap, which again will really push the agency world. So I'm pretty buoyant that I think 24 should be, 23 seems like a bit of a correction and possibly an overcorrection, and I think 24 will start to see a more normalisation of the market.
Okay, with contract, technology, startup, and the continued race for talent.
100%.
Great. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap things up. Thanks very much for
Thanks for having me.
being with us. An absolute pleasure.
I'll
Good
have to come back in a year's time and see whether all
Let's see if those
these predictions came through.
Great. Thanks, Andy.
Cheers now.